When the emergency room doctor asked me what year it was, I almost laughed. I had driven myself to the hospital that morning. I had remembered my insurance card, the name and dose of every medication I took, and the fact that my granddaughter's birthday was the following Thursday. But my daughter Claire was standing behind the doctor with her arms folded, watching me as if I were taking a test I had already failed. "What year is it?" he asked again. 2026, I said. "And before you ask, the Prime Minister is Anthony Albanese. I'm in Perth, and I came here because I nearly fainted in my kitchen." He gave a small smile. Claire didn't. Then he looked at his computer and said, "Your daughter tells us you've been having significant memory problems for about 6 months." I turned around. "She told you what?" Claire's face changed for half a second. Not guilt, exactly. More like irritation that the doctor had said it in front of me. "Mom, don't make this harder," she said. That was the moment I stopped thinking I was only in hospital because of low blood pressure. By lunchtime, I knew something else was wrong. And by late afternoon, a nurse named Marisol had slipped a folded photocopy under my discharge papers and whispered, "You should read what your daughter signed before you go home." I was 68 years old, widowed, and until that day I had never once wondered whether my own child might be preparing to take control of my life. Claire is my oldest. My son Daniel is 4 years younger and lives in Adelaide. Claire lives 20 minutes from me with her husband, Scott, and my granddaughter, Lily. For most of her life, Claire had been dependable. When my husband, Peter, died 3 years earlier, she handled practical things I couldn't face and never made me feel foolish for needing help. She was also controlling. She made lists for holidays, corrected stories told out of order, and solved problems before anyone asked her to. I could be stubborn in return. I had lived in the same brick house in Mount Lawley for 31 years. Peter and I had paid it off slowly. Everyone assumed I would downsize after he died, but I stayed. The house held my memories, and it was my main financial security. I had superannuation and savings, but I wasn't secretly wealthy, and I did not depend on Claire. About 6 months before the hospital visit, she began asking questions that felt slightly too specific. "How much is left in your offset account? Have you updated the will since Dad died? Wouldn't it be easier if someone else had access to your banking, just in case?" At first I thought it was anxiety. Peter's death had frightened all of us. Then she started mentioning memory. It began with little things. One Sunday, I forgot that Lily had changed netball practice from 10 o'clock to 11. Claire said, "Mom, that's the second thing you've forgotten this month." "The first thing was where I put my sunglasses," I said. "They were on my head. I'm allowed one cliché at my age." She didn't laugh. Another time, I repeated a story about Peter's first car. Claire looked at Scott and said, "See?" I remember that word because of the way she said it. See. As if they had been discussing me before I entered the room. I asked her directly whether she was worried about me. She softened immediately. "I'm just being careful. Dementia can start subtly." "Then I'll speak to my GP. "I can come with you." "I can also cross a road by myself." That irritated her, and I knew it. I did speak to my GP. He reviewed my medications, daily functioning, driving, bills, sleep, and memory, and he wasn't concerned. He said grief, stress, and ordinary aging could explain occasional lapses, and that we would reassess if anything changed. When I told Claire, she asked why he hadn't ordered a brain scan. That should have bothered me more than it did. The morning I went to hospital, I had stood up too quickly after breakfast and nearly collapsed beside the kitchen bench. My vision went gray, and I grabbed the counter until it passed. I called Claire because she lived closest. She insisted on taking me to emergency. By the time we arrived, I felt embarrassed more than sick. A nurse checked my blood pressure. It was low. I had also been dehydrated after a stomach bug 2 days earlier. Nothing about the situation suggested dementia. Yet Claire kept answering questions for me. "What medications are you on?" the triage nurse asked. "I can answer," I said. Claire spoke over me anyway. "She gets confused with medications sometimes." I stared at her. "No, I don't. You mixed up the blood pressure tablets last month." "I changed the time I took one because the doctor told me to." Claire sighed as though I were proving her point. "Please ask me the questions," I told the nurse. The nurse looked at me, then at Claire. After that, she did. Marisol wasn't the nurse who first triaged me. I met her later after I had fluids and blood tests. She was probably in her 40s, calm, observant, the kind of person who seemed to notice more than she commented on. Claire had left the cubicle to make a phone call. Marisol checked my cannula and said, "Do you feel safe making your own medical decisions?" The question was so unexpected that I thought I'd misheard. "Yes." "Do you want your daughter involved in discussions with the doctors?" "I don't mind her being involved. I do mind her talking as if I can't speak." Marisol nodded once. "Have you appointed her to make decisions for you if you lose capacity?" I hesitated. Years earlier, before knee surgery, Peter and I had completed enduring guardianship and power of attorney documents as part of sensible estate planning. Claire and Daniel were named as substitute decision-makers only if I could not make decisions myself, depending on the document and circumstance. My solicitor had explained that clearly. "Yes," I said, "but only if I can't decide for myself. I can." Marisol's expression stayed professional, but something in it tightened. "Do you have a diagnosis of dementia?" "No." She was quiet for a moment. Then Claire came back. The conversation ended. A junior doctor later asked me orientation and memory questions. I answered them. He said the emergency department was not diagnosing dementia and that my blood results fit dehydration. Claire pressed him. "But you're documenting the memory concerns, right?" "I'll document what you've reported," he said, "and my assessment." Then he asked me directly whether I cooked, drove, paid bills, or had recently become lost or unsafe. "Yes, yes, yes, and no," I said. Claire muttered, "She doesn't tell us everything." "Neither do you, apparently," I said. "She followed me into the corridor when I went to the bathroom." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because someone has to be realistic." "About what?" "You're not the same since Dad died." "Of course I'm not the same. My husband died." "That isn't what I mean." "Then say what you mean." She pressed her lips together. "You forget things. You get overwhelmed. You refuse help because you're proud." I waited. Then I asked, "Have you been telling people I have dementia?" She looked away. That was my first real answer. When I returned to the cubicle, I texted Daniel, "Have I seemed confused to you lately?" He called almost immediately. "Mom, what's happened?" I kept my voice low and explained. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Claire asked me 2 months ago whether I'd support selling your house if you had to move into care." I sat down on the edge of the hospital bed. "She asked you what?" "She said she was planning ahead. I told her it wasn't our decision." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought she'd annoyed you with the same conversation already." I closed my eyes. Claire had never mentioned care to me, not once. That afternoon, the doctor discharged me with instructions to drink more fluids, temporarily monitor my blood pressure, and see my GP within a few days. Claire went to bring the car around. Marisol came in with my paperwork. She placed the pages on my lap, then slid one folded sheet beneath them. Her voice was quiet. "You're entitled to know what's been entered and submitted about you. Read this somewhere private." I looked at her. "What is it?" "It's a copy of a patient representative declaration your daughter signed when you arrived." My fingers went cold. "What did she declare?" Marisol glanced toward the curtain. That you have diagnosed dementia, that you lack capacity to understand medical information, and that she is your authorized substitute decision-maker. I unfolded it after Claire left me at home. Her handwriting was at the bottom. Claire Mercer Hall, relationship, daughter. The form itself did not give her control of my property. It was a hospital administrative form used to establish who could receive information or act as a representative in certain circumstances. But the statement she had signed was unambiguous. She had written that I had been diagnosed with dementia in November. I had not. She had written the name of a geriatrician I had never seen, and in the box asking why I was unable to act for myself, she had written, "Progressive cognitive decline, unable to safely manage health or finances." I read that sentence 4 times. Then I put the paper on the dining table where Peter used to sort the mail. For a few minutes, I could almost hear him telling me not to jump to conclusions. Peter had been infuriatingly fair-minded, so I did something difficult. I did not call Claire. I called my GP's office, my solicitor, and Daniel. My GP saw me the next morning. He confirmed he had never diagnosed dementia and arranged a fuller cognitive assessment so there would be a clear current record. The assessment did not show evidence of dementia. I stumbled on one attention task, but the clinician reminded me that capacity was not decided by a single score. My daily functioning and ability to understand decisions mattered. My solicitor, Helen, reviewed my enduring documents. Claire could not simply activate them by claiming I lacked capacity, and they did not give her automatic control of my property. Then Helen asked me a question I had not considered. Has Claire had access to copies of these documents? Yes. After Peter died, I gave both children copies. Any recent requests from banks, real estate agents, care facilities, or government offices? No. She looked at me carefully. Check. That afternoon, Daniel helped me review my email and paperwork. In my deleted folder, we found a 3-week-old message from an aged care placement service thanking me for an inquiry about residential options. I had never contacted them. Daniel asked whether Claire knew my email password. She did. Years earlier, she had used my laptop after Peter's funeral, and I had never changed it. I changed every password that day. When we called the placement service, they confirmed that a woman named Claire had asked about facilities with short waiting periods and whether a home could be sold while a parent moved into care. No placement or contract had been made. The question was no longer whether Claire had been planning around me. It was why she was in such a hurry. Daniel found the answer 2 days later, though not intentionally. Scott called him. I was at Daniel's hotel room when the phone rang. He had flown over because he no longer wanted to handle this from another state. Scott sounded exhausted. He said, "I think Claire's in trouble." Daniel put him on speaker after asking permission. Scott told us their building design business had been struggling for nearly a year. A major client had collapsed, owing them money. Claire had also used part of their home equity line without telling him to keep the business afloat. Then came the part that changed everything I thought I understood. Scott said Claire had promised a private lender that she expected to receive family property funds within months. I asked, "What family property?" There was silence. Then he said, "Your house." I did not shout. I remember that clearly. I looked through the hotel window at traffic moving along Wellington Street and asked him to explain. Scott said Claire had convinced herself that I needed to move somewhere smaller anyway. She believed the house was too much for me, and that, if it were sold, I could buy into a retirement village and still have money left over. Somewhere along the way, Mom should probably downsize had become Mom is declining, and then Mom can't manage. And finally a plan in which Claire expected access to money that was not hers. Scott claimed he hadn't known she was telling doctors I had dementia. I believed him about that part. I did not believe he had asked enough questions about the promised money. When Claire came to my house that evening, Helen was there with me. Daniel sat at the far end of the dining table. I placed the hospital declaration in front of Claire. Her face went pale. "Where did you get that?" "That is your first question?" I asked. She looked at Helen, then at Daniel. "This is an ambush." "No," I said. "An ambush is telling a hospital your mother has dementia while she's sitting 3 meters away." Claire's eyes filled, but I was not ready to comfort her. "Why did you invent a diagnosis?" "I didn't invent." I tapped the line with the geriatrician's name. "I have never met this doctor." She stopped. Helen spoke calmly. "Claire, you should be careful about making further statements that aren't accurate." Claire turned on me. "You brought a lawyer into this?" "I brought my lawyer into something involving false claims about my capacity and my property." For several minutes, Claire defended the idea instead of the lie. She said the house had stairs at the back. She said I had nearly fainted. She said I had forgotten netball practice. She said living alone was risky. I listened. Then I said, "None of that explains why you told a lender you expected money from my house." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. That was when she finally understood how much we knew. Claire began crying quietly, not theatrically. She looked tired. She admitted the business debt had become worse than Scott knew. She had guaranteed part of it personally. She was terrified they would lose their home. She had started thinking that if I sold mine, I could still be comfortable and she could borrow some of the remaining money. "Borrow?" Daniel said. Claire flinched. "I would have paid it back." "With what?" I asked. She couldn't answer. Then she said the sentence that hurt more than the paperwork. "I thought once you were settled somewhere, you'd see it was better." Better. Not for me, for the plan. I asked her whether she ever truly believed I had dementia. She wiped her face and said, "I thought you were starting to decline." "That isn't what I asked." She stared at the table. "No." There it was. No misunderstanding. No overprotective daughter who had panicked in a hospital. She had used a frightening possibility as leverage because it made her plan easier. The consequences were practical, not theatrical. Helen helped me revoke and replace the old substitute decision arrangements with clearer safeguards. I notified my bank that no one else was authorized to act for me, secured my email and records, and asked my GP and the hospital to correct the false history. The hospital's patient liaison office documented that Claire's declaration was disputed and that no emergency doctor had diagnosed me with dementia or found me incapable of making decisions. That mattered. Once a false statement is attached to your name, a clear correction matters too. Claire and Scott eventually sold their own house, moved into a rental, and closed the business. They arranged repayment of their debts with professional help. I did not rescue them financially. I paid Lily's school camp fee directly once and bought groceries when things were tight, but I did not hand over cash, guarantee a loan, or sell my home. That was harder than I expected, but I knew what Claire had been willing to do when she believed my property was the easiest answer to her fear. For nearly 4 months, Claire and I barely spoke. She sent apologies that began with the consequences to her. "I've lost my brother's trust. Scott may never forgive me. Everyone thinks I'm a monster." I didn't respond to those. Then one evening she sent a different message. "I told a hospital you were incapable because I needed you to become easier to move." I knew I was exaggerating, and then I crossed into lying. "I was afraid of losing my house, so I treated yours like it was partly mine. I am sorry for what I did to you." I read it twice. I did not forgive her that night, but I answered, "Thank you for finally saying it plainly." A year has passed now. Claire comes for coffee every second Sunday. She knocks before entering. She no longer knows my bank balance, has access to my email, or attends medical appointments unless I invite her. We are rebuilding something, but it is not the relationship we had before. Maybe it never will be. Daniel calls more often now, though I have told him not to turn concern into surveillance. I do not need one child replacing another as the manager of my life. And Lily still measures herself against the fence when she visits. Last month, she had grown another 2 centimeters. She accused me of shrinking. I told her that was entirely possible, but I still knew what year it was. She laughed so hard she nearly dropped the pencil. I kept the copy of the form Claire signed. Not because I enjoy looking at it. I don't. It sits in a folder with my updated legal papers, the hospital correspondence, and the medical assessment that followed. For a long time, I thought the most frightening thing on that page was the word dementia. It wasn't. The frightening part was how easily concern could be shaped into a story about me, then repeated until other people might begin making decisions around that story. I am not ashamed that I needed help after Peter died, or that I occasionally forget an appointment time. If the day comes when I truly need more support, I hope I have enough sense to accept it. But needing help and losing the right to be heard are not the same thing. My daughter forgot that. For a while, I almost did too. The nurse who handed me that folded page never accused Claire or told me what to do. She simply made sure I saw what had been written about my own life. That small act gave me the chance to ask the questions nobody else knew I needed to ask. And in the end, that was what protected me. Not revenge, not some clever trap, just a piece of paper, a few careful people, and the decision to believe that my voice still counted.